Billionaire's son failed every test, until the Jewish janitor taught him one secret. "Mr. Montgomery, your son is a disgrace to our institution." Principal Williams' voice echoed through the corridors of Prestridge Academy as 17-year-old Alexander Montgomery stood outside the room, listening to every word that shattered what was left of his dignity. Through the crack in the door, he saw his father, tech tycoon Robert Montgomery, holding a pile of failed exam papers as if they were evidence of a crime. History, 12%. Mathematics, 8%. Literature, absolute 0. 3 consecutive years of academic failure at the most expensive school in the country, where a single tuition fee cost more than an entire family's annual salary. "Perhaps we should consider an institution more suited to the boy's intellectual level," Williams continued, adjusting his gold-rimmed glasses with a smile that Alex knew well, the same one used with scholars and staff. "There are vocational schools that could be more appropriate." Prestridge Academy wasn't just a school, it was a status symbol where billionaire families sent their heirs for networking disguised as education. Over the last 3 years, Alex had become the institution's inside joke, the perfect example that not all the money in the world could buy intelligence. $3 million a year at this school, Williams. $3 million. Robert Montgomery clenched his fist, his voice charged with a cold fury that Alex had known since he was a child. "And my son is still a walking disappointment. Mr. Montgomery, considering your family's generous donation to the new library, we've done everything possible. We've hired the best tutors, offered private lessons, even allowed oral exams. But there's a limit to what money can buy." In that moment of total humiliation, Alex felt a gentle hand touch his shoulder. It was Benjamin Rosen, the 60-year-old janitor who had been cleaning the same corridors for 3 decades. His blue eyes had a depth that contrasted with his simple uniform and calloused hands. There was something about him that Alex had never been able to define, a quiet dignity that none of the arrogant teachers at the school possessed. "Some of the most brilliant minds in history were misunderstood by their contemporaries," Benjamin whispered in his slightly European accent, which Alex had always found intriguing. "Einstein, for example, was considered slow by his teachers. Feynman almost flunked out of Princeton." Alex stared at him in surprise. It was the first time in 3 years that anyone at that school had treated him as anything other than a walking disappointment. "How do you know about Einstein? And who Feynman is?" Benjamin smiled enigmatically, his eyes shining with a knowledge that seemed too deep for a simple janitor. "Let's just say I've been around exceptional minds before I got here. Sometimes the problem isn't the person's intelligence, but the way they try to teach it." Inside the room, the humiliation continued. "The boy has an IQ of 85, according to our tests," Williams lied blatantly, knowing that Alex had never had any psychological assessment. "Maybe it's time to accept that not every child is born for academic excellence." Alex clenched his fists. 3 years of failure had created a narrative about him that everyone accepted as absolute truth. Teachers didn't even bother to correct him when he made a mistake. They simply shook their heads in pity and moved on to the next student. Classmates treated him like a hopeless case, the son of a rich man who had bought a place without merit. "You know that's a lie," Alex muttered to Benjamin, his voice shaking with restrained anger. "I'm not stupid. I just can't understand the way they explain things." Benjamin nodded slowly, as if he understood something that even Alex hadn't realized yet. "True education isn't about memorizing formulas or dates, young Alexander. It's about awakening the mind to question, to connect ideas, to think independently. Something this institution forgot a long time ago." He walked away, pushing his cleaning trolley, but not before leaving something in Alex's coat pocket, a neatly folded piece of paper. "When you're ready to discover your true potential, look me up in the library after school. There's a room in the basement that no one else knows about." Alex unfolded the paper, a complex mathematical equation about quantum theory, solved with an elegance that none of his expensive tutors had ever demonstrated, accompanied by a sentence in Hebrew translated underneath: "Wisdom is more precious than pearls," Proverbs 3 verse 15. The meeting inside the room came to an end with his father making the final decision: military school next semester. "Maybe strict discipline can do what traditional education couldn't," Robert declared, his voice laden with disappointment. At that moment, while listening to his father plan to send him away as a problem to be solved, Alex realized that maybe he wasn't as dumb as everyone thought, and that the humble Jewish janitor, whom everyone had ignored for decades, held secrets that could change not only his grades, but his whole life. Something about the way Benjamin had solved that equation, with a simplicity that made his tutor's methods seem like unnecessary complications, aroused a curiosity that Alex hadn't felt for years. For the first time, a small flame of hope ignited in his chest. If you've ever felt misunderstood or underestimated by a system that prefers to judge rather than teach, don't miss this story of transformation that proves how the most unlikely people can change our destiny forever. The decision was made. Highland Military Academy in Tennessee would be Alex's new home in just 6 weeks. Robert Montgomery signed the papers with the same businesslike coolness he used to dismiss employees, as if he were discarding an investment that had failed to pay off. Maybe 2 years of order and discipline will do what 3 years of academic stewardship couldn't, Robert declared over dinner, cutting into his steak as if it were his own son's self-esteem. There you'll learn that failure has real consequences. Alex chewed in silence, feeling the weight of the word failure echo through the dining room where even the paintings on the wall seemed to judge his incompetence. 3 years of low grades had created a narrative that everyone accepted as immutable truth. Alex Montgomery was simply too dumb to take advantage of the opportunities that the family's money provided. At school, news of the transfer spread like a virus. "Did you hear? That loser Montgomery has been sent to military school," laughed Jake Sullivan, the son of a senator, as he threw himself into his library chair. "I bet he can't even pass the grade there." The teachers feigned pity, but Alex noticed the ill-concealed relief in their eyes. No one else would have to pretend to care about his grades or make up elaborate excuses for his failures. He would be the problem of another institution, in another state, far from the judgmental eyes of Atlanta's elite. During those weeks of increasing humiliation, only Benjamin treated Alex like a human being. While cleaning the corridors, he always found time for small conversations that seemed casual, but carried deep weight. "The mind is like a garden," Benjamin said one afternoon, polishing the mirrors in the main bathroom. "Sometimes it needs different seeds, planted in different soil, to flourish." "Easy to say," muttered Alex, tucking another failed exam into his backpack. "You don't understand. I'm really dumb. 3 years prove that." Benjamin stopped cleaning and faced him squarely. Einstein developed the theory of relativity when he was 26. Feynman almost flunked out of Princeton. Darwin was considered mediocre by his professors. His voice carried an authority that didn't match his janitor's uniform. "Intelligence isn't about measuring how quickly you memorize formulas, young Alexander. It's about seeing connections that others can't." Alex noticed something peculiar. Benjamin never talked about these geniuses like someone who had read about them in books. He spoke like someone who had met such people in person, with an intimacy that aroused growing curiosity. "You were a teacher before you worked here, weren't you?" asked Alex directly. Benjamin smiled enigmatically. "Let's just say I had a very different previous career to this one. Sometimes life forces you to start again from scratch, but that doesn't mean you lose everything you've learned along the way." The evasive answer only intensified Alex's curiosity. There was something about Benjamin, the way he quoted complex scientific theories, how he solved mathematical problems with natural elegance, how he spoke about education with restrained passion, that didn't fit with his current position. Meanwhile, Principal Williams was stepping up his subtle campaign to ensure that Alex left the school without causing further damage to the institution's reputation. During a meeting with other parents, he casually remarked, "Sometimes it's better to accept that not every child is born to academic excellence. Young Montgomery is living proof that money can't buy intellectual ability." The words reached Alex's ears through colleagues who loved cruel gossip. Each despicable comment fueled a growing anger that he kept carefully hidden. 3 years of being treated like a walking disability had taught him a valuable lesson. People showed their true faces when they thought you were powerless to retaliate. One afternoon, Alex decided to test his theory about Benjamin. He arrived at the library early and found the janitor rearranging books in the science section. Unseen, he observed Benjamin leafing through a book on quantum physics, making mental notes and nodding as if reviewing familiar concepts. "Interesting reading for a janitor," commented Alex, appearing from behind a bookcase. Benjamin startled slightly, but soon regained his composure. "Curiosity has no profession, young Alexander." "You're lying," said Alex calmly. "Nobody reads about quantum mechanics for fun. Nobody solves complex equations while mopping floors. Who are you really?" For a moment, Benjamin's eyes revealed depths that Alex had never seen before. There was sadness there, but also strength, The kind of strength that comes from having lost so much and survived to tell the tale. I'm just a man who's learned that knowledge is the one thing no one can take away from you, Benjamin replied softly. And maybe it's time you discovered the same. He handed Alex a piece of paper with a mathematical problem even more complex than the previous one. Try to solve it tonight. Don't use memorized formulas. Use logical reasoning. Think about how the pieces connect. Alex took the paper, feeling that he was holding something more meaningful than a simple academic exercise. It was a test, but not the kind he was used to failing. That night, alone in his room, Alex looked at the equation from a different perspective. Not as an impossible obstacle, but as a puzzle waiting to be put together. For the first time in 3 years, his mind didn't freeze in front of numbers and symbols. And slowly, methodically, he began to see connections he had never perceived before. As if a long-locked door was finally starting to open, revealing that perhaps his mind wasn't the failure that everyone, including himself, believed it to be. While Alex discovered sparks of an intelligence that had always been there, hidden under layers of discouragement and misguided expectations, Benjamin held secrets about his own past that would explain not only his unusual wisdom, but why he had chosen to help exactly that boy lost in the corridors of a school that had forgotten how to teach. That night, Alex stayed up until 3 a.m., poring over the equation Benjamin had given him. For the first time in years, his mind didn't freeze in front of the numbers. Instead, he began to see patterns, connections, as if a fog was finally clearing. When he finally arrived at the solution, he felt a rush of adrenaline that he had never experienced with mathematics. It wasn't just correct, it was elegant. He had found a simpler way than the methods his tutors had tried to force down his throat. The next morning, he arrived at school an hour early and found Benjamin in the library, organizing books with the same meticulous precision as always. "I've solved it," said Alex, handing over the paper with his solution. Benjamin carefully examined the paper, his blue eyes scanning each line of reasoning. An almost imperceptible smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Interesting approach. You used group theory intuitively." Benjamin stared directly at him. "How did it feel to solve it?" "Like I could finally breathe," Alex admitted. "Like my mind was working the way it should." "And what was the difference this time?" Alex reflected for a moment. "You didn't tell me I was stupid before I started. You didn't give me a formula to memorize. You just asked me to think." At that moment, Professor Rebecca Chen appeared in the library carrying a pile of books. She stopped when she saw the two of them talking and noticed the math problem in Benjamin's hands. "Sorry to interrupt, but that's advanced number theory," she said, clearly curious. "Postgraduate level." "Young Alexander here solved it by himself last night," said Benjamin calmly. Professor Chen examined the solution, her eyebrows rising progressively. "This approach is quite sophisticated. Alex, did you really do it yourself?" For the first time in 3 years, Alex saw a teacher look at him with genuine intellectual respect. "Can I ask you a question, Mr. Rosen?" Rebecca turned to Benjamin. "What exactly is your academic background?" Benjamin hesitated, then sighed deeply. "I was Professor Emeritus of Theoretical Physics at Columbia University. I specialize in quantum mechanics and string theory. I published dozens of articles and supervised more than 50 doctoral students." The silence was deafening. Rebecca Chen was visibly shocked. "Professor Benjamin Rosen, are you the Benjamin Rosen who developed the Rosen-Weinberg equation for the behavior of subatomic particles?" "I was," Benjamin corrected gently. "That was before my life disintegrated." Alex felt as if the ground had moved beneath his feet. The man who cleaned toilets had contributed to his fundamental understanding of the universe. "What happened?" asked Rebecca, still processing the revelation. "Institutional prejudice disguised as budget cuts. Subtle but effective anti-Semitism. Some colleagues didn't like that an immigrant Jew received so much recognition," Benjamin explained without bitterness. "At 55, I was early retired, and no university wanted to hire me afterwards." The anger Alex felt was like a fire. For Benjamin, for himself, for all the lost years, for every teacher who had given up without really trying to teach. "They don't know who you are," said Alex, his voice heavy with emotion. "And they don't need to. Knowledge isn't about recognition, young Alexander. It's about transmission." Rebecca Chen was thinking fast. "Professor Rosen, I'd like to organize an extracurricular study group for students interested in advanced mathematics. Officially, I can't have you teach without up-to-date credentials, but there's nothing stopping me from inviting you as a volunteer consultant. Would you do that? Alex asked, a spark of hope igniting. For a man of Professor Rosen's intellectual stature? And for a student who clearly has potential that no one has bothered to develop? Absolutely. Meanwhile, on the other side of the school, Principal Williams was having a very different conversation with Robert Montgomery. Frankly, Mr. Montgomery, I think the military academy's decision is the right one, said Williams over the phone, his feet propped up on the desk. The boy is associating with inappropriate people. Just yesterday I saw him talking extensively to the cleaning staff. Which cleaning staff? Robert asked with irritation. That Jewish janitor, Rosen. The man must be about 60. I find it worrying that Alexander seeks guidance from low-level staff. It shows a lack of social sense. Arrange the transfer for next week, Robert replied, his voice laced with impatience. I want this problem resolved quickly. Williams hung up with a satisfied smile, unaware that Alex had figured out how to access the school's recording system, knowledge acquired during his years of academic failure watching IT technicians work. A skill that everyone considered useless was about to prove devastatingly effective. That afternoon, Alex, Rebecca and Benjamin met in the small study room in the basement of the library. The setting was perfect, secluded, quiet, and completely off the radar of the school administration. Before we start, said Alex, pulling a small tape recorder from his pocket, I think you should hear something interesting. He played back the conversation between Williams and his father, each prejudiced word echoing in the small room like a damning sentence. Rebecca Chin clenched her fists, her normally serene face contorted with indignation. That man is running an educational institution. Benjamin remained calm, but his eyes revealed a determination that Alex had never seen before. Very interesting. Very revealing. Professor, Alex addressed Benjamin with a title he could finally use, you said that knowledge is about transmission. How about we pass on a lesson they'll never forget? What do you have in mind? Asked Rebecca, her voice low but charged with energy. Alex smiled for the first time in weeks. Williams wants to send me away because I'm an academic failure. How about we show the whole school community exactly what kind of educator he really is? Benjamin nodded slowly. And I have some ideas about how to do that in an educational way. The three of them mulled over a plan that would not only save Alex from the military academy, but expose the institutional rot that allowed prejudice and ignorance to masquerade as educational excellence. In that silent basement, among dusty books and the dim light of a fluorescent bulb, three seemingly powerless people began to forge something that would shake the foundations of one of the most elitist schools in the country, proving that sometimes true education happens exactly where the powerful least expect to find it, and that underestimating someone can be the most expensive mistake you can make. The evening of Prestridge Academy's annual Donors Gala arrived like a silent storm. The main hall was filled with Atlanta's elite, tycoons, politicians, renowned academics, all gathered to celebrate educational excellence and open their wallets for the institution. Alex arrived accompanied by his father, but this time there was something different about his posture. Robert Montgomery noticed, but interpreted it as final resignation before the transfer to the military academy, scheduled for the following week. Ladies and gentlemen, Principal Williams announced from the stage, beaming in his tuxedo, tonight we celebrate not only our tradition of excellence, but our commitment to the highest educational standards. The audience applauded politely as Williams continued his pompous speech about maintaining institutional quality and selecting only the best elements for our school community. Alex watched from the VIP table, his fingers drumming nervously. At the next table, Rebecca Chin was discreetly checking her laptop. At the back of the hall, Benjamin stood in the shadows, having entered from the back as part of the cleaning team. No one questioned the presence of a janitor during events. And now, Williams continued, I'd like to introduce one of our emerging young talents, who will demonstrate how our unique pedagogical methodology transforms even the most challenging cases. Alex stood up, walking towards the stage under the condescending gazes of those present. Many whispered about Montgomery's problem child, who would finally be straightened out in a military school. Good evening, began Alex, his voice clear and steady on the microphone. My name is Alexander Montgomery, and for 3 years I was considered a failure by this institution. A murmur ran through the audience. Williams frowned, not expecting this opening. Today I'm going to present my research on institutional bias disguised as educational excellence, Alex continued, signaling to Rebecca, who activated the projection. The first image showed detailed graphs on pass rates by socio-economic background at Prestridge Academy. The second revealed clear patterns of academic discrimination based on social status. Interesting how a school that charges $50,000 a year can maintain such high standards, Alex commented sarcastically. Particularly when you look at how it treats staff and students deemed inadequate. Williams tried to interrupt. Mr. Montgomery, this was not the agreed topic. You're right, Director. Let's get on with the main topic. Alex smiled coldly. I'd like you to meet the man who really taught me during these 3 years. Benjamin emerged from the shadows, removing his janitor's uniform to reveal a simple but dignified suit underneath. This is Professor Dr. Benjamin Rosen, former Professor Emeritus of Theoretical Physics at Columbia University, developer of the Rosen-Weinberg equation, author of 47 scientific papers and advisor to 52 PhDs in quantum physics. The silence in the hall was deafening. Several people recognized the name. Some were retired physicists, others had heard of Rosen's revolutionary contributions to science. For 3 years, Alex continued, while you treated him like human furniture, he taught me more about math, physics and critical thinking than all the expensive professors at this school combined. Williams was visibly pale, realizing that he had completely lost control of the situation. But the most interesting thing, Alex continued, is to find out what our educational leaders really think when they think no one is listening. The screen projected recordings of Williams' conversations. First, the prejudiced comments about Benjamin being the Jewish janitor and low-level employee. Then the full conversation about Alex being a disgrace, and the need to remove him for associating with inappropriate people. Williams' voice echoed through the room. I find it worrying that Alexander seeks guidance from low-level officials. It shows a lack of social sense. The silence was broken by indignant murmurs. Several Jewish donors in the audience were visibly upset. Robert Montgomery looked at his son with a mixture of shock and something Alex had never seen before, respect. Principal Williams, Alex addressed the now trembling man on stage directly. You always said I was too dumb for this school. Would you like to test that theory? Without waiting for an answer, Alex walked over to the board and began to solve a quantum physics problem that would baffle experienced university students. His hands moved confidently, each equation flowing naturally from the previous one. This is the Rosen-Weinberg equation applied to quantum computing, Alex explained to the fascinated audience. A problem that most physicists would take hours to solve. In 15 minutes, Alex had demonstrated not just competence, but genuine genius. The audience was mesmerized. Benjamin approached the microphone. Maybe it's time to question an education system that confuses privilege with potential, that allows prejudice to masquerade as academic standards. Williams tried one last desperate move. This is a travesty. This boy has had expensive tutors, special preparation. Actually, interrupted Rebecca Chin, taking the stage, I can confirm that Alexander solved these problems without any prior preparation. As a professor with a PhD from MIT, I can attest to witnessing an extraordinary mind being systematically sabotaged by our own institutional arrogance. At that moment, board member and major donor Charles Whitehill Jr. stood up. Director Williams, as someone who lost family in the Holocaust, I am absolutely disgusted by your recorded comments. This is exactly the kind of prejudice that our family is sworn to fight. Other donors began to speak out. Williams' reputation was crumbling in real time, in front of everyone who mattered to his career and social status. Alex returned to the microphone for the final blow. For 3 years, you've told me that I was unsuitable for this school. It turns out that it was the school that was unsuitable for me. The hall erupted in applause while Williams stood paralyzed on the stage, realizing that he had lost not only his job, but his entire reputation in front of the elite who once respected him, and that the boy he had tried to humiliate had just rewritten the rules of the game in a way that no social etiquette manual could have predicted. The following months brought changes that no one at Prestridge Academy could have predicted. The recording of the gala went viral in less than 48 hours, shared millions of times with titles like Genius Caretaker Destroys Prejudice at Elite School, and Teenager Humiliates Racist Principal in Epic Revenge. Williams was fired before the sun came up the next day. The school board, bombarded with angry calls from outraged donors, had no choice but to cut all ties with the man who had turned the school's reputation into a national joke. His career in education was over for good. No reputable institution would hire him after the recordings went viral. "Irony of life," commented Rebecca Chen over coffee with Alex and Benjamin a few weeks later. "The man who spent his career judging others by their background now can't even get a job as a substitute in a public school." Alex had cancelled his transfer to the military academy the day after the gala. Robert Montgomery, still processing the revelation that his failed son was actually a prodigy, asked for a formal apology, something Alex never imagined hearing. "I was so focused on molding you in my image that I couldn't see who you really were," Robert admitted over a tense but honest dinner. "Maybe you can teach me a few things about humility." 3 months later, Alex was enrolled at MIT on a full scholarship, not because of the Montgomery surname, but on pure academic merit. His final grades at Prestridge Academy were impeccable, a transformation that left teachers stunned. Benjamin was invited to return to academia by 5 different universities, including Harvard and Princeton. He chose to accept a position at the local state university, where he could implement revolutionary educational methods without the elitist pressure he had faced before. "I prefer to teach where I can make a real difference," Benjamin explained when asked about turning down more prestigious offers. "True intellectual elite has nothing to do with zip codes or bank accounts." Prestridge Academy has undergone a complete overhaul. The new principal, Dr. Patricia Williams, ironically no relation to her predecessor, has implemented strict anti-discrimination policies and created scholarship programs for talented students regardless of socio-economic background. Rebecca Chen was promoted to Deputy Chief Academic Officer, leading the transformation of the curriculum to focus on critical thinking rather than mechanical memorization. "True education should awaken minds, not domesticate them," became her personal motto. 2 years later, Alex was completing his degree in theoretical physics when he received a special invitation. Prestridge Academy wanted him to deliver the graduation speech as an exemplary alumnus. The irony didn't go unnoticed by anyone. On the day of the ceremony, Alex took to the same stage where he had destroyed Williams' career. This time, however, his message was one of hope, not revenge. 2 years ago, on this very stage, I learned that true intelligence doesn't lie in knowing all the answers, Alex began, his voice echoing through the packed auditorium. It's in asking the right questions and having the courage to question systems that prefer conformity to genuine excellence. In the front row, Benjamin smiled proudly. At 62, he had found not only professional redemption, but renewed purpose. His new university students adored him, and his lectures on quantum physics were the most popular on campus. "The best lesson I learned," Alex continued, "was that true knowledge doesn't recognize artificial boundaries. It doesn't matter if you clean floors or run corporate boards. What matters is that you never stop learning and that you never accept someone else defining your limits." Former Director Williams was watching the ceremony on television from his small rented apartment, where he was living on unemployment benefits after months without a job. The bitterness in his eyes contrasted with the radiant dignity of the man he had tried to humiliate. During the post-graduation reception, Charles Whitehill Jr., the same donor who had spoken out against Williams at the fateful gala, approached Alex. "Young Montgomery, my foundation would like to fund your doctoral studies," he offered, extending a card. "We need more people like you changing the world." Alex smiled, but politely declined. "Thank you, Mr. Whitehill, but I already have a full scholarship in the program. I'd rather that funding go to another student who needs the opportunity." At that moment, Robert Montgomery realized that he had raised not just an intelligent son, but a man of integrity. Alex's transformation had been complete, from an academic failure to an example of human excellence. 5 years later, Alex defended his doctoral thesis on the educational applications of quantum physics. Benjamin was in the front row, now Professor Emeritus again, this time for universally recognized merit. "He tried to define me as a failure," Alex reflected during his defense, "but he ended up giving me the greatest gift possible, the determination to prove that true potential cannot be measured by other people's prejudices." Williams remained unemployed, surviving on sporadic jobs, while Alex published groundbreaking articles and Benjamin received international honors for advances in educational methodology. The best revenge had actually been success built on foundations of integrity, knowledge, and compassion. Alex learned that true victory is not in destroying those who have wronged you, but in building something greater than they could ever imagine, and inspiring others to do the same. If this story of transformation and justice has touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories that prove that our true measure is not in what others think of us, but in what we build despite their limitations. Because sometimes the best teacher is exactly where we least expect to find him, and the greatest lesson comes disguised as the greatest humiliation.